So I'm Tim Kirby, the Chief Executive Officer of Releaf, and I'm sat today my good friend from Portugal. Michael, introduce yourself.
Yeah, that's true. Last night I was your good friend having dinner, and today I'm the founder and CEO of SOMAÍ Pharmaceuticals talking with you.
And it's been fundamental to our growth. When we launched in February as Releaf, we believed that there was a huge addressable market, because if you look at any other market, 3% of adult population have a medical cannabis prescription. In the UK, for 6 years since the legislation changed in 2018, it stagnated at around 0.05% of the population. And before we went to market, we asked ourselves why, and there were some fundamentals. There was a lack of an ability to go to market effectively of the incumbent providers in terms of patient acquisition. But one of the real challenges that was out there was supply chain, vertical integration into a supply chain. And what we knew to be a cornerstone of our ability to scale was to partner with people that could guarantee consistency and quality. And I'd love you to share more about the facility in Lisbon that I had the privilege of you taking me around a couple of weeks ago. Because if you look at the cannabis naive market, so if it's 3% of the adult population, that's 3 million people. So how do you make the addressable market an obtainable market? Well, by doing that, you've got to open up demographics. And I think that there's a huge amount of people that would struggle with taking a cannabis flower, grinding it up, put it in a tube, and then stick it in a vaporizer, which is why I think extraction opens up those demographics. And when I looked at the different types of products that were available through extraction, gloopy tar doesn't taste very well. Again, it didn't help accessibility for the cannabis naive. Can you talk about why is yours so much different and fundamentally different than the other extractions that we explored before partnering with SOMAÍ?
When you look at a market like the United States, which is where I came from, there's a big dichotomy within the market. So there's early states that were developing cannabis products early. And keep in mind, if you go back 15 years ago, there wasn't a huge, massive extractors that specialized in cannabinoid extraction. You had very basic, crude, garage-style extraction based upon the principles, of the polarity of the product. Over time, that equipment started to develop, and as a $32 billion market, you can imagine an incredible amount of money went into the technology for extraction over that period of time. So what may have started as a basic extraction technique, CO2, ethanol, could be liposomal, ultrasonic, whatever, those early factors which were being used in other industries, like CO2 came out of the perfume industry. Mm-hmm. Well, they had to adopt these, and they found that these machinery could be used for the greater good of pulling out different cannabinoid properties, and that developed. When you fast forward over to Europe, one of the missions of SOMAÍ was there was plenty of flower people from around the world bringing in from Colombia and South Africa and Europe and Canada. And so our entrance, we thought the best way was to come in with the largest portfolio of extracts and try to bring products for the naive market as well as a mature market. Mm-hmm. And to that effect, we made over 100 plus, EU GMP stabilized products. Right. So, that's your beginning. Now you have to go into the technology and the processes in order to understand, the differences of what they bring. And products that we saw in the market in the early days and still today do not exist in mature markets because patient and consumer preferences has changed so dramatically. Mm-hmm. So I try to explain to people, this is about technology and know-how. Right. The more technology you have, the more you can isolate and get the right elements and get rid of the non-essential elements that don't make for a better experience. And in the golden triangle of extract, it pretty much lies in cost, because you have to make a product that's reachable for people. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense to make a super expensive product that only a few can have. And generally, the technology is so good now and efficiency is so good, you can have a good costing product that reaches all different demographics, old, young, and different indications. And then it's performance. You have to have the highest performance, which all comes to technology and craft, in the extraction. and the taste of the product, something that you're going to ingest multiple times, once or multiple times a day. If you don't have good patient compliance with taste, nobody's going to use it. Doesn't matter. And so hitting all those three are your guiding principles when making an extract.
And when you look at the extracts that I would deem to be inferior, and I don't say that because I'm biased because of our commercial relationship, I say just because it's a matter of fact. And is that a lack of technology or a lack of know-how, or do they drive a price? Why is the product that, as I described, doesn't taste very nice? It's not very pleasing to look at compared to yours, which, dare I say, looks like extra virgin olive oil and tastes of mint, if that's what you wanted to do. Is it technology, price, or know-how that is the differentiator between your product and those that I believe to be inferior?
Yeah, I mean, we always want to say there's a place for everybody, Unfortunately, the current products in the market carry an under 1% market share, in the world, and so it's a very small niche product that eventually goes away into the future.
Sorry, so oil is 1% of market share?
The current products that you're referring to,
Okay.
rather than go into
that.
the inferiority, which is a word I try to stay away from, because
Okay.
there's somebody who likes these products and we want to be fair to them, right?
Yeah.
But it's so small, that it doesn't exist, in the reality. And it's because people have advanced to a greater understanding. So the European market started off in a very basic format. I have this flower, this grow. I bought this extractor. I'm going to use my waste, the product that I can't sell as flour, and I'm going to turn that into an oil, and I'm going to sell that to somebody. And I'm going to do one-step extraction, put it into some carrier oil, and I'm going to deliver that bottle, and I'm going to tell everybody this is great.
So the rules of low quality in, low quality out apply to this as much as anything else?
Well, it's kind of, it's just an early form, decade plus ago, 15 years ago. And it was just that nobody understood what they can do and what technology can do with it.
Do you think it was a way that they just felt they could monetize their waste?
Without a doubt, that's your first thought. And your second thought is, oh, this is a great product. The early form products that we need to fill this gap. And okay, we're going to stabilize this product because we're pharmaceutical and this is a pharmaceutical product. And we don't really, we're going to bring in the first level. But that doesn't exist now in the future, worlds. And so we still have to address new markets and, naive markets and older markets, but that doesn't mean that we have to walk backwards and start with an unclean oil that is basically just a raw ingredient that has to go to the next steps. And so, one of the things, we have a 3-step process in order to deliver just the basic API. And so the first thing we're doing.
What's an API for those that?
Yeah, just the active pharmaceutical ingredient.
Right.
This is your basic extract. So your extract can be what you see today and then you mix it, or your extract can be what you see in our product today and then you mix it with different terpenes and things of that nature, carrier oils. You could make it faster acting. There's many things you could do once you have your basic oil. And so there's one basic. And then ours takes it just one step further, which is exactly where the future markets exist in consumer preferences. So your first step is pull the terpenes out.
Right.
They're very sensitive. No matter what extraction technique you use, if you don't pull the terpenes out, you're going to lose most of them.
And that's what you pull out first, is it?
Yeah, that's the most sensitive part. There's claims out there that, look, if you use CO2, you're going to have more terpenes than ethanol. Sure. There is a fractional truth to that, but the reality is you're going to destroy most of them anyway. So if you don't treat those as the sensitive molecules you are, and basically you just have to heat them up and they will evaporate and hit a cold condensing unit and drop. That's how sensitive they are. So imagine blasting them with CO2 or ethanol and saying, I'm recovering the best I can out of that flour. And it's just common sense tells you that doesn't work. So you start with that technique. Then you look at your extractor. It doesn't matter what technique you use. The only basis of measure today, which is factual, is what is your efficiency? So, the question becomes, if you could get your machinery to work at 90+%, and most machinery in Europe is dialed in around the 70s, But if you can get up to a US standard, of 90% efficiency, you're pulling all those minor and major cannabinoids out. That's very important. But question is what input went into that material?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you started just from the beginning, and I'm going to go into the third step, but I just want to point something out. If you take a degraded waste product, trim is what they call it, which doesn't, by the way, exist in the European monograph. So our products are designed for countries that have market authorization dossiers, which are necessary. And their first question is, prove your source material.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's a degraded trim, which is just a fine a granulated flower, not the full bud flower, it's automatically degraded in terpenes and minor cannabinoids count. You can make that into an oil, of course, but you're not going to get the full robust powers out of that one. You're not going to get all the terpenes. You're not going to get all the minors. You're going to have an efficiency level that's lower. And so all of our extracts start with single strain, which is important. There's no mixing of flowers, so you can know where that product came from, what strain that came from. It has different properties, each strain. On the other end, what you end up doing is you have a full bud flower as opposed to the trim, which is the most. You don't see people say, I'm going to smoke the trim today.
Mm-hmm.
You say, I'm going to smoke the full bud. I want the A bud. I want the big one. Well, of course you're going to get a better product if you take that approach. And so you'll get more terpenes the first process. You're going to get more minor cannabinoids, on the second process if you work on efficiencies, if you use a high quality flower in the full bud single strain. Most people just have that middle step, right? That's all they do, and mostly it's degraded flower. And now you go on to the next step, is you take out things that are non-essential you don't need. What are they? And we have a research report coming out on this that's just tracked 2 years of the making of these extracts. You take out fats, lipids, sugars, chlorophyll, plant materials. And if you could think of any of those that you really think are going to help you, in a medical product or in a recreational product or whatever, I challenge anybody to find something in there and I'll put it back. And one doctor said, I like chlorophyll. I couldn't, we couldn't take it so seriously. I was like, well, you're not a tree.
Yeah.
Tell me the percentage you want and maybe I can put that back in. But once you go through that process, now you have a very clean and stabilized oil that's replicable. And if you have the right machinery, batch 1 will look just like batch 1000. And so that therapeutic effect that you like from the beginning, and we have multiple choices. And so that one you chose, that can work for you consistently, or you can find something else in our portfolio if you so desire to change later, because many people do change what product they want.
And I think that's been, you mentioned quality and consistency. Certainly, when Releaf went to market to open up the market, and we looked at the different providers that were able to support, and particularly that education and awareness piece, because with the greatest respect for everything you've said, I don't understand it all, and a cannabis naive person that's got a condition, they're poorly people, they want the outcome of the medication, and they want the medication, back to that word accessibility, to open up demographics. And we've been, how countries do you operate in? 9, 10 countries?
10 countries now
10
and growing.
countries. And if you think that there is millions and millions of people in the UK, and you can choose your data points. You can go, there are 13 million people that suffer from chronic pain. There's a market for us. You can look at 60 million prescriptions written last year for less than 5 million people for opioids. There's another market. There's another data point that gets thrown around, that there's over 2 million people buying cannabis on the illicit market for medicinal purposes. So our ability to present as pharma is super important. And I know you, and I asked you if you operated in how many countries, because certainly we have to be careful sometimes as well with our language. It's illegal to smoke your prescription in the UK. Okay, it's a heat, not burn. It's a device that vaporizes. And I know you know this, but just in case anybody's listening to this, I just want to be clear that in the UK, it's illegal, and was clear in the legislation change in 2018 that you can't smoke your prescription. So how do you make this accessible? Well, one of the ways I know we've made it accessible is we've been supplying your oils now for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Did they land in the UK? And you've seen the feedback. I know we shared it with some of your team. We've got 2 cohorts of people. people that are seeking an alternative therapy where traditional medications maybe have let them down. And you've got another cohort of people that have found a solution to a condition where perhaps traditional types of medicine have let them down, and they're used to taking oil. And you've seen the feedback. I know there was 3 last week where patients of ours said, I will never go back. Why do you think it creates that emotive response in patients that have tried your oil, that they say, I will never go back? From an experiential point of view as a medication, why does that positive feedback rain on us every week since we've been supplying your oils?
Yeah, look, it's very gratifying. We see it in all the countries, just so you know, similar responses. And I'm very glad that the same response is occurring here with you on the launch of these products through Releaf. And so the people have spoken. So this was already decided before I arrived in Europe. It was already decided by patients.
What was decided?
What quality standards they want with their oil. The Europeans are now just getting that standard, and you'll see everybody will want, all manufacturers eventually will have to go to this standard, and they'll have to upgrade their facilities, and they'll have to upgrade their SOPs, and they're going to have to restabilize their APIs and start there. Because it is a future product, but it is the only today product also. And so you have to think about it in terms of the UK has been, let's say it's one of the larger cannabis markets in the global markets. Germany, Australia, UK, these are your top 3s. And so they've become accustomed to more choices, more flower choices, more extract choices, more delivery methods in extracts. It could be the oral drops or the oral gums, or it could be a vapor inhalation.
And talk about gel capsules, because I think that could becomes
be gel capsules.
So pharma when you've got back to that. And I'm selfishly talking about our market in the UK for Releaf, which is woefully underserved, an unmet need in healthcare, and to open those demographics, I think things like the pastilles that you were showing me when we came to SOMAÍ just outside Lisbon, the pastilles that, again, just in blister packs in a pharma feel. And talk to me about those ones that you had where you could break them in half, and so you could moderate the dosage.
So, it's one thing, there's, a lot of people, especially today, they're excited to hear about a new delivery device called the pastilles or the oral gums, however you look at it.
Gel capsules, I think there's a huge opportunity there.
And these products, have a place in demographics, of course. And so, as an example, let's start with the soft gel caps.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, a soft gel cap only makes sense if you have a multiple dosage variety. So you can't have a one size fits all, because there's people at different levels. So a study we're doing right now with an older generation, they're looking at the 1 mgs, or they're using the 1 mgs, I should say. And so this is a lower dose 1 mg THC and CBD fixture. But then as the markets, if you go back 12 years ago, what was the most common dosage form, in the US medical markets? And the US market, by the way, is a $10 billion medical market. 22 billion adult use or more, but 10 billion in medical market. There's over 6 million patients who have voted on these products. They moved up to a 2.5. And then they moved up to a 5. And then they moved up to a 10. And so if you don't carry all those ranges for the younger, the more naive generation to the more experienced generation that needs more, and some people need 20, 50 mgs. It's much less, but you got to carry those. And you have to carry them in a balance, to a 2.5 for 2.5, 5 for 5, 10 for 10. You have to carry it in just THC, because some people just prefer THC. So 2.5, 5, 10, right? And then you have to have very minimal THC dosages, so mostly CBD dosages, in order to carry the full range. And so that's your entrance when you're doing a proper soft gel release line. Now you take it one step further, a next generation, which we already formulate, because these things take 1.5 years to
Hmm.
come out from when we make them. You'll see some of our products are 2 years plus in stability.
For sure.
So these were all planned a long time ago. As a matter of fact, now we're planning 2026. And so, in 2025, new products were already released. And what are the 2025 release of the soft gels? Is a faster absorbing one. So now you have to repeat all of those and stabilize an entire range with a more fast acting excipient, which activates in your lymphatic system, just like paracetamol plus, soft gel plus.
Hmm.
And that's going to appeal to another demographic that needs quicker relief. Whereas somebody may want a more steady, they have a sleeping disorder, so they want to carry it through the night. And so, or there's people that have pain and they need it, a lot faster. So you have to think about not just making that product. You have to think about who's using it and how it's going to benefit them, and then provide them with the doctors with all the right tools to prescribe it for all dosages. Because if you only make a 10 for 10, well, that's going to appeal to 10, 20%.
I know exactly what the doctors want.
Yeah.
Right? The doctors want responsible dosage control. And I know that they feel the things that we're so excited about in the future, gel capsules, vape carts, be them pastilles. I think the doctors are so much more comfortable. And today, we prescribe 75% flour. I believe as we go through next year, that will completely turn on its head. I think we'll be prescribing 75% of my products, because I know as this market opens and expands that, again, it just creates a less stigmatized version of cannabis than grinding up a flower, to be able to have something in a blister pack that has exactly the same effect on their condition, but perhaps it hasn't got the same association with a recreational market that I think is one of the barriers to entry for many people with conditions. Do you see in other markets you're in the balance between, in the medical space, flower prescription and oil and other carriers? Do you see that changing in terms of its weighting going forwards?
Well, I mean, the trend line is there already, right? So it's the largest upward sloping trend line, and it's a flower will always have its position. But if you take a mature state in the U.S., an early form state, they're about 1/3 oral solutions, 1/3 inhalation extracts, concentrates, and vaporizers, and 1/3 flower. And if you take the general average, because there's older states that just came in earlier, because the first thing you have is the chicken before the egg. You got to make the flour before you can make the extract. So that's the first love that's being shown to the patients. And so the actual average it skews a little bit across the board, and it's more like 60% 60% extractable products, 50% extracted products, and 60-40 with the flowers. But that's across an average of older markets and younger markets. But the older ones inevitably end up 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Right.
Europe, Australia, Germany, UK, they're more around 20. UK, Australia is a little more, verging 25-30% extracts. But they have a bigger diversity. So like Australia has 1,000 SKUs.
Wow.
Yeah. But that's not so far off from the UK, which including flour has about 500, I would say, somewhere in that range. But at 1,000 SKUs, a lot of the diversities come from extracts. There are hundreds of flowers, but it's really the extract diversity and choice that's driving that decision. And so you'll see that trend line always continue. It's just inevitable. There's just more of a demographic out there. As they get opened up to cannabis, they would like to have an oral solution, especially the older demographic.
And it's how that marries to prescribing guidelines. So I'm going to record a piece here in the same studio after this for our investors. And the last time I did that was in July.
Yeah.
And we were doing 100 patients a week. We're doing 100 patients a day now. And we've grown to having 26 doctors. And thank you, by the way, for hosting them. The 26 doctors are going to come to your facility. What would you want them to take away, do you think, from how does it build their knowledge base going around your facility just outside of Lisbon? So when they take that to clinic, it gives them the confidence perhaps to prescribe things they're not as familiar with. Do you have a view of that?
This is the most important educational experience that doctors have when they come to our facility. And it's being open to teach people what really should be going on and how your extracts are made, and why the performance exists by showing them exactly how it's done. This openness does not exist in the industry. They just send you a bottle and they say, this
For
is
sure. Yep.
this is quality, and just
Absolutely,
believe
yep.
us. Well, this isn't true. In order to actually prove the quality, you have to explain to people and show them exactly what you do and why technology and the choice of your flowers and single strains makes a better product, and educate them, because they've never done that. Most people have seen a box. Like, I was laughing the other day, a pharmacist goes, well, I don't try all of my medicines. That would be a little crazy. And I said, well, cannabis is one of those ones where you actually should try them, and if you do use it for a specific indication, you should know the differences of the different products, at least if you're recommending them, because it's too much for people to believe that a doctor's going to be up to date on every single product and every single strain that comes to the market.
But I think a patient has that perception of a doctor, which is wrong. Not just in medical cannabis.
Yeah.
They assume that a doctor does understand all the medications for all conditions. When you stand back, clearly that can't be the point. Well, that can't be the case. They follow a decision tree. Try this, now try that. Tried that, now try this.
That's correct.
And then being able to have an alternative to those traditional medicines and having the confidence to prescribe them. And I think when we take the doctors to facilities such as yours, the feedback I get is incredible. And I'll give you an example. You know that we partner with Glass Farm in the UK for our flower. We took our doctors to their facility. Our capacity grew by 25% the next day, with doctors giving us more time away from the NHS, because it just built confidence in what they were actually doing. And it gave them some language and narrative that gave them even more ability to explain to their peers and friends that, yes, they're prescribing cannabis, but they understand so much more about it. How many doctors do you think now go through the facility each year?
Oh, it's a weekly event,
right?
From around the world. We are very open. We want people to learn and to understand. Most people are out there saying, look, I have my 3 bottles. I have my 10 for 10 and my 25 for 1. And this is the choice. Well, I have 18 10 for 10s.
Yeah.
How do I explain that this one, why we made this one for this one and this indication, why this one works better for sleep and this one works better for arthritis and this one, depending on the terpenes that were added into there. If you have an oral gum, is it just, we made 8 different versions.
Yeah.
So you need a faster acting version, for that person. It divides in half because, it's not like a oral drop where you can adjust your dosage, and you have optionality for formulations. Like the soft gels, you need to make those because those are fixed. You can't cut a soft gel in half. It's going to squirt all over the place. And so if you think of that experience that the doctor needs, and then you got to explain that to them, there's no better place than showing them how it's made, showing them why your product is consistent throughout, why it tastes better in the oral drops, why that terpene mix was added. And once they come away with that, well, now they know how to prescribe.
For sure. And that connection with the process definitely gives them confidence.
You have this, great, I was just at this facility and I remembered him telling, the company telling, here's what's good for that condition. Why don't you try this? And let's see if that works for you better than what you've been using.
Absolutely. Because if you think of the opportunity for both our organisations, there's no reason whatsoever why Releaf can't have 1 million patients by the end of, let's say, 2026. And if we've got 1 million patients and we're prescribing 75%, let's say, SOMAÍ products, that opportunity is so worthy of the investment that we make in educating and awareness in the marketplace, but also that education and awareness of doctors. And I don't know that other facilities and other chief execs that I've dealt with embrace that in the way that SOMAÍ does. And has that always been at the heart of SOMAÍ's thinking, connectivity to doctors and their prescribing practices?
I think it's the only way.
Right.
We have to be out there educating and helping the doctors understand this broad portfolio, but more importantly, how it can help their patients. And your clinic is independent. we are independent.
Mm-hmm.
You made a conscious decision to learn about our products and learn about the breadth of products. Your doctors are making a conscious decision to independently look at our products and educate themselves on the benefits for their patients. Well, there's many places out there that cannot say that. The clinic owns the manufacturing
Mm-hmm.
and the grow. The flower you're prescribing happens to be the flower you're growing. Don't see how that independence isn't an inherent conflict of interest that perpetuates, maybe a mediocre product or a product that's not as helpful as a more independent doctor and clinic can look and say, you know what, independently, if this product really is
Mm-hmm.
good for my patients, or am I just selling this to improve my bottom line
Yeah.
today? And I think that is a very key point, especially in the UK market, the independence of the clinic's doctors and manufacturing process.
And you can do anything, as you well know, Michael, with a bit of belief and trust.
Yes.
And we've got belief and trust, and we've got momentum. And I know from my side, we felt so serendipitous when we came across you and SOMAÍ, and we came to the facility and we formed this partnership, that we could now have absolute belief and trust that we can deliver quality and consistency to patient treatment plans in the absolute knowledge that we'll always have their medication available when they need it. And I know that hasn't been the case all the time. So I think I mentioned the numbers before. We've gone from July 100 patients a week to here we are in the beginning of November at 100 patients a day. And one of the reasons is that belief and trust in the supply chain. You have to be able to go to market, build a digital ecosystem that's fundamentally based on belief and trust, that also is condition-led, and that you focus on the condition of a patient or prospective patient. And what we found is the best way to create a pathway for a patient is to connect them to other patients that look like them, live like them, sound like them. And we have this feel, felt, found kind of culture within our patient community where they come forward and say, I understand exactly how you feel. I felt the same, but what I found was, and when they can land on products that are so accessible, like the SOMAÍ range, I know that that is going to be something that we stand on as we drive to get these million patients by the end of 2026.
Yeah, look, when you're dedicated and your doctors are dedicated to the patient, to that experience, to the knowledge of cannabis, it's completely different paradigm than in some other countries.
Absolutely.
Where a GP is just filling out a form. I heard about this company here, try this out, and get out of the office. It's 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And that you'll never be able to go back to that doctor and say, well, hey, doc, this is the feeling I had, and could you adjust? Or because they don't know the answer to that. They filled out just some name that they heard about somewhere. Sure. Once you have that knowledge base and you can adjust, because maybe the first therapy didn't work really well. Mm-hmm. These are high probabilities, and especially with extracts, people who are overdosed, as an example, meaning they took too many mgs, they'll say, no, we don't want that anymore. I didn't like that feeling. And getting a doctor that's knowledgeable about that product and moving that forward, well, this is really the experience that they want. And hey, doc, this has happened on this. Have you heard of this? They don't want to have, of course, you can go online and find good information. And as you pointed out in the beginning, there's enough already evidence through your releases on different media that patients like these things.
For sure. I think we've actually defined what good looks like to a audience that is naive to these alternative therapies who didn't know what good looks like.
That's right.
And I think that will stand us both in very, very good stead as we start to redefine the medical cannabis space in the UK.
And it's where they need to be anyways. It's where they will be. It's better you start now and you start to educate from the beginning and you see the difference of the product, because there's going to come a time when you won't be able to see that difference. And do you know we have different terpene profiles and minor cannabinoids. One of the great things also when they're going to come, there's a lot of people ask me, well, how are you the only ones that publish your terpene and minor cannabinoid profile? And I explained to them, GMP is a very simple, complexity in its own way, but there's a very simple rule to everything. Once you do something, test it, make sure it's in line, and then go on to the next process. It's methodology.
And what you've said to us is, you've been so open to, if your doctors or your patients want something else that's in the realms of the art of the possible, just ask.
Yeah.
And if you can make it, you will.
No way. I take notes every time. I show them different I even do a terpene testing to show doctors what a terpene really is, because they know the word.
Exactly. I agree with you.
They'll smell it.
Yeah.
And then I'll say, which one did you like? And they'll raise their hands. I like number one. And I'll tell them what that is. And I'll say, I don't know if you're a cannabis user or not, but if you are, you seem to tend towards something that will help you to sleep. Do you have trouble sleeping? And resoundingly, I'll get a positive answer over the amalgamation of each one that they like. And it becomes a basis of understanding that their patients are going through the same exact thing, and they're trying to find their way through this maze of products. And it needs to be not just shown, taught, but experienced.
And I think we should make a date a year from now to see what we've done to the UK market, because I know that what we're doing today is only the beginning. And I bet we sit here in a year and have this similar conversation, and we're talking about a much more evolved market with much more evolved products being driven from doctor feedback, patient feedback, and the demands that allow us to grow together. So we should make it a date in a year from now, Michael.
No, I'm coming back before a year from now. I quite like I love the sophistication of the London life, but I also want to get out there and meet some of the doctors and people out in the Midlands and other areas. Because some people, they can't fly in to see us.
You went to Sandwich yesterday.
I did go to Sandwich yesterday.
And we had to talk about the Earl of Sandwich and his ability to invent the thing that we now call a sandwich.
Yeah, but I'm not quite entirely sure he's from there. I did find out, though, that the antibiotics were invented there. Viagra was invented there. Yeah, and Dover Sole is somewhere near there.
Yeah.
And so, there was all of these anecdotal things I've heard of and not gotten out of London. And then finally the chance to go out there. Now I want to go out and spend a little more time and see the English countrysides.
Well, let's make that happen. And I'm sure we'll do lots more of this as we go forward.
I would love to do that.
Thanks, Michael. Been a pleasure.